Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with the love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums. Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. Y'all, it has been a pretty good week so far, and I'll tell you, I'm actually recording this episode fairly early this week because I am heading to Cape Cod this weekend. So it turns out there is a production of $1 Million Quartet happening out there, and their drummer has a bit of a conflict going on this weekend. So the day this episode drops, I will be in Cape Cod just chilling and playing the show with the cast. The drummer actually also has another conflict on July 6th. So I will be playing both shows that day at the Cape Playhouse. So if any of you happen to be anywhere near Cape Cod on July 6th, come on out and see me do my thing. Interestingly, it's with a cast that I've never worked with or even rehearsed with. Live theater, y'all. As a matter of fact, the evening show on July 6th is going to be my 750th performance of $1 Million Quartet, which is a pretty darn big deal. And it's really kind of funny to me that I'll be doing it with a bunch of people who I've never done this with before, although by then I will have played it with them twice, and I might even know all of their names, although since they are human animals, which are my least favorite kind of animal, I honestly doubt it. Anyway, this last weekend was Father's Day, and I had an awesome 3 days with my son. As a matter of fact, on Friday, we went to a Harrisburg Senators game, and I have to share a story with y'all from that. But first, I want to say thank you to Elizabeth the Lizard Dunleavy for inviting Miles and I to the game. Elizabeth and her family were an absolute blast to hang out with, especially her daughter Nancy, who y'all may remember from my interview about Zoo Camp a while ago. But the story I wanted to share wasn't actually, it's not about them, but it does tie into one of my favorite expressions, commit to the bit. All right, so do y'all know what mayflies are? We gonna get real animal nerdy here for a minute. Okay. Mayflies are bugs, which are also called shadflies, fish flies, Canadian soldiers, or upwinged flies. And they are aquatic insects from the same family as dragonflies. And the ones I'm talking about here, they kind of look like white, less cool dragonfly cousins. They do actually come in a variety of colors, but not the ones I'm about to tell you about. Those are just white and boring. So they are these wild, weird bugs that basically they live most of their lives in their juvenile state, where they are known as nymphs or naiads. And they live in the water during this phase, which lasts for up to 5 years. And they go through these periods of molting and growing, but they remain non-flighted and live under the water and stuff. And then their final molt from the nymph stage, it takes them to a sub-adult stage in which they are winged, and they look to the naked eye like adult mayflies, but they aren't actually adults because they aren't sexually mature, and their eyes and their legs are also underdeveloped in this phase. They also appear duller in color than the final adult version of the mayfly. And they will spend anywhere from just a few hours all the way to like 2 days in this form before they molt again into their final adult mayfly form known as the imago. And then it gets even crazier than what I've shared so far. Although in the earlier molt phases, the individuals can molt and grow and change on their own schedule, all of the final molting lines up for the mayflies in an area, and they transition to subadult and then to adult simultaneously in like insanely huge numbers, right? The human equivalent of this would be like if every kid in a school district had their own birthday like they do until they all magically turn 17 on the same exact day and then are seen as full adults. It all just magically syncs up. And in this final molt, which is referred to as a hatching, the mayflies have one goal: reproduction. As a matter of fact, they are so focused on that goal, they don't even have true mouths or any way to eat or drink during this final phase of their life. All of the mayflies hatch together, either at dawn or dusk, get as busy as much as possible, and then drop dead. The lifespan varies from species to species in this phase, but they are all quite short, with many lasting a day or less, and with the shortest documented being a species in the southwest United States that lives for 5 whole minutes. At least we know they're having fun while they're living those 5 whole minutes. And when these guys hatch, oh boy, do they hatch. They do so in huge numbers, and they are especially drawn to bright lights. So I told you all of this because this is an animal podcast, and I actually think that is kind of fascinating, but also because the Harrisburg Senators play their games on City Island, an actual island in the Susquehanna River, which is a mayfly habitat. Meaning that at certain games, including the one I was at on Friday, a mayfly hatching happens, and the entire sky fills with mayflies drawn to the lights of the game. It is such a thick cloud of mayflies, it literally looks like a blizzard if you look up, but it's all just white flies apparently getting it on. And their bodies pile up everywhere, making like walking surfaces slick and covering people in the stands. And if you smash them at all, they kind of leave this gray residue on you. It's a whole thing. It's kind of crazy. Miles and Nancy were actually smart enough to find a place with a roof where they could still watch the post-game fireworks, proving that they are smarter than their parents are. But yeah. And this has been a thing since I was a kid. You go to the Senators games, and sometimes there's a hatching, and that's just life. But the best part of all of this, and the reason that I decided to share this with you, is that 10 years ago, on April Fool's Day, the Senators released a press statement saying they were changing their name to the Mayflies. And y'all, they went all in. They had uniforms made and merch created and actually played their game that night as the Mayflies. Then, of course, they announced it had all been an elaborate April Fool's joke. But they still do it from time to time. 10 years later, the game I was at was a Mayflies game. They had the uniforms. They called themselves the Mayflies. All of the graphics had the Mayflies logo, etc. This is 10 years later, and they still commit to the bit, and I couldn't love it more. I actually had to buy a Mayflies hat to commemorate my night, and to keep the dank bugs out of my luxurious locks. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to share that story with you and tell you all about mayflies, but enough about that. Now it's time for...
1, 2, 3, 4.
Ow, that's a funky monkey, tree kangaroo, or a binturong.
It's Zoo News.
Yeah.
All right, so we are starting this week with a really, really exciting story out of Houston. One of the topics that just keeps coming up on this podcast is the elephant endotheliotropic herpes virus, commonly called EEHV. Now, this is a disease that has been taking far too many elephants from us for quite a while, both in human care and in the wild. If you don't remember, I did an episode about the disease with Dr. Lauren Howard of the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, where we talked all about this topic and the work being done to try to create treatments, cures, and vaccines for the disease. At the time, there were a few hopeful signs, including a lot of shared information between facilities and scientists, but there was nothing official to report beyond that hope and that promise of potential future ideas. And to give you a quick overview of how bad this disease is, in case you missed that episode, the average survival time from diagnosis is 36 hours. 42% of elephant deaths can be accredited to EEHV, with as many as 80% of the deaths of elephants living in Europe being credited to the disease. While it is most prevalent in elephants between the ages of 2 and 8, any elephant of any age can contract the disease, usually with disastrous results. But now we have some very, very good news. On June 18th, a 40-year-old elephant named Tess, who lives at the Houston Zoo, became the first ever elephant to receive a brand new EEHV vaccine. Now, this is an mRNA-style vaccine, so the same style as the COVID vaccines that we all got to hear so much about recently. mRNA means messenger RNA, and they basically work by introducing a piece of messenger RNA into the body that corresponds to a viral protein, which then basically teaches the cells how to produce that protein and makes them start doing so. Now, this is instead of the more traditional form of vaccine, which is basically, it involves exposing the patient to a small amount of the disease. So the body starts producing antibodies to fight off that small invader. Despite some fear mongering from a certain side of the political spectrum, mRNA vaccines are actually widely considered better than traditional vaccines by the medical community for a number of reasons, including that they are non-infectious and don't integrate with the host's DNA. Also, changes to mRNA structure can make the vaccine more stable and effective than traditional vaccines, and they are produced in such a way that allows them to be created rapidly and with an ease of scalability and cost-effective production methods, meaning that they are a lot easier to create, a lot easier to ramp up production of, and cheaper than traditional vaccines, right? That is why, with the COVID crisis, they were able to create these vaccines and get them out to so many people so quickly, which scared a lot of people and made a lot of people say, oh, they're not testing them and stuff like that. But this is a new frontier, and it's really cool that it helped out with the COVID situation, and now it's helping out with elephants. So now that Tess has received the vaccine, which, by the way, was created by virologists at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, animal care experts and veterinary staff will be closely monitoring Tess to see how she does with it and how effective the vaccine is. The effectiveness will be determined by evaluating antibody levels in Tess's blood, as they also test for specific side effects or adverse reactions. Now, assuming that it all goes well, the next step in this trial is vaccinating additional members of the herd at Houston and monitoring them as well. This is a vaccine that is specifically targeted at Asian elephants, but it is believed that, if it proves to be successful, it won't take much additional work to get one ready for African elephants as well. Now, this is a huge deal for some, frankly, huge elephants. The Houston Zoo has been teamed up with Baylor College of Medicine on EEHV treatment and prevention for 15 years now, and the collaboration is already credited with helping to establish the protocols and treatment guidelines that animal care professionals the world over credit for saving some of the elephants that have contracted the disease. So, I want to say congratulations to Dr. Paul Ling at Baylor and the entire veterinary and elephant care team at the Houston Zoo for working together to get to this point and giving us the brightest ray of hope we have seen in this battle since the disease was discovered. Here's hoping the trials go well and that elephants both in zoos and in the wild are able to receive this vaccine. Wiping EEHV off the face of the planet would be one of the most amazing stories in modern-day veterinary medicine. Fingers crossed on this one, y'all, but this is good news. All right, and that brings us to our births for the week, and there is no more exciting birth for me this week than that of 2 baby red pandas at the Toronto Zoo. This is the first Pandlet birth announcement of the season, but that's not the only reason I'm excited about it. And no, I don't just mean because it is red pandas and I'm obsessed. Although, also that. But the story itself is also amazing. So, this birth is to mother Sakura, who arrived at the zoo earlier this year to spend some time in red panda retirement. Sakura is older, right at the tail end of the breeding age for red pandas, and she has never successfully bred before. So, the idea was she could move to Toronto, where they want to redo parts of the panda holding and habitat anyway, and they could give her a great retirement home while making their desired changes to the rest of the habitat. Now, before Sakura left her last home, she was still put together with her mate Arun, but seeing as how their breeding attempts had not been successful before, no one really thought anything would come of it. Then, when she arrived at the Toronto Zoo, they did some fecal testing and discovered that she might just be pregnant. It's kind of hard to tell with red pandas, but they thought so. And yeah, it turns out they thought they were getting one panda, but they got three instead. So far, the little ones are doing well, and Sakura is being an excellent mother. I'm so excited for the entire team at the zoo, especially friends and former guests Lisa and Robert, and a friend who hasn't been on the podcast, at least not yet, Allie. Congrats, y'all. This is huge. The Brookfield Zoo has announced the birth of two Mexican wolf pups. Both are female and are already integrated into the pack and able to be seen by guests. Luby Bat Conservancy has announced the birth of some variable flying foxes, all of which are very valuable genetically, so they represent a huge deal to the breeding population at Luby. The John Ball Zoo has announced the birth of a snow leopard cub to parents Milo and Yuki. Now, Yuki is a first-time mom, and surprisingly, because it's not always the case, both her and the cub, who is also a female, are doing very well together. There is a new Caribbean flamingo chick, or flamlet, at the Fort Worth Zoo. The baby stands out as it has not yet taken on the famous pink hue of adult flamingos, making it easy to see on exhibit. This next one's pretty exciting. Two screaming hairy armadillo pups. Yes, it's pups. I looked it up, though I still like screaming hairy armlets, have been born at the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans. This is a huge deal, as these are the first two successful births of the species in North America since 2018. They can be seen in the nocturnal house at the zoo. Longleat has announced the birth of 4 Amur tiger cubs. This is a species with under 1,000 individuals in the wild right now, so that is amazing. Their parents, Yana and Red, last became parents in 2019, and it seems they have retained their incredible parental instincts because everyone is doing just so well. What an incredible win for a hugely endangered species. The Nashville Zoo has announced the birth of 2 crocodile tegus, which is a species of lizard. And this is a particularly incredible accomplishment, as these are the first of their species to ever hatch at an AZA-accredited zoo anywhere. Amazing. And then last but not least in births, Buttonwood Park Zoo has announced the birth of 3 beaver kits, or beavlets. This is, by the way, another great example of why my system works better than the real one. Beavlets is awesome. But anyway, they are living with their folks on exhibit already, and the family is thriving. And then that brings us to our deaths, and we're only going to touch on a few this week. Maritime Aquarium has announced the death of Polly, one of the harbor seals that called the aquarium home. She was 37 years old and had lived at Maritime since she was 3. She was known for being sassy and curious and loved training, and she was easily identifiable by the heart-shaped birthmark on her chest. At 37, Polly greatly outlived the median life expectancy for her species under human care, which is 25 years old. So, amazing work, and sending all my love to the team at Maritime. The Virginia Aquarium has announced the passing of a geriatric female sand tiger shark named Single Notch. Single Notch was found unresponsive and did not respond even after emergency medical treatments were given, so the correct decision was made to euthanize her. She had lived at the aquarium since 1995, making her one of the longest living residents at the aquarium, and will be greatly missed. And now, moving on from births and deaths, we get to the rest of our Zoo News section. I want to take a moment here to give some props to the Tulsa Zoo, which recently posted an end-of-life care post about 2 geriatric animals that call the zoo home. Jody, one of the female chimpanzees at the zoo, who is around 50 years old, has been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation and congestive heart failure. The team at the zoo has created a plan for her healthcare moving forward, one that she is actively participating in, by the way, because, amazing training. But as this disease is the #1 cause of death for chimps, the prognosis is not good, and the zoo wants to let everyone know that. They also, in the same post, announced that Roger, a 20-year-old river otter, has also been experiencing a decline in health, including decreased mobility and heart disease, both caused by old age. I love that the zoo put this information out there now so that guests can stop by and say goodbye, or at the very least won't be caught off guard by the death announcements. This is a great type of transparency that I just really love to see. So sending best wishes to the teams at the zoo who are preparing to say goodbye eventually to their incredible animals. Next up, we have a really cool story out of Woodland Park Zoo. Shyla, the 14-year-old gray wolf there, just became the first ever wolf to receive a pacemaker. Shyla suffers from a life-threatening heart condition that the pacemaker should help to control. The surgery was completed as a collaboration between the veterinary staff at the zoo and an expert team from Olympic Veterinary Cardiology. This is an incredible first for the species and shows not only the level of commitment the team at Woodland Park Zoo has for all of their animals, but could also pave the way to making procedures like this more commonplace for wolves if this works. This is a big deal, y'all. It's very cool. And speaking of very cool, a keeper at the St. Louis Zoo recently saved the life of an elephant beetle with some creative thinking. The beetle was found to have a broken pupal chamber, which is similar to a moth's cocoon. It's like the place they go to transform to their next stage of life. Well, a broken pupal chamber usually means death for an elephant beetle, but keeper Renee Hazen decided to make a new chamber out of foam and place the beetle in it. After the normal period of change, the beetle emerged perfectly healthy. What an awesome bit of quick thinking from Renee. And again, this is one of those things that could really influence the keeping of elephant beetles, which is awesome. So last week, we talked about the fact that camels escaped their holding area at Cedar Point Amusement Park in Ohio. Well, this week they had another animal escape. This time, goats broke free. The goats walked around and mingled with guests for a while before being brought back into their habitat. Now, as of this recording, Cedar Point has not given any public statement on how either of these escapes happened, but 2 in 2 weeks is a lot, y'all. Either someone is messing with the animal habitats there, or Cedar Point is doing an incredibly terrible job of, taking care of the animals in their care, which is not great. Not great. Our friends at the Beardsley Zoo in Connecticut have an interesting survey they are asking guests to take. They have teamed up with the Sloth Conservation Foundation to try to gauge the attitudes of people about sloths, and particularly about handling sloths. The focus seems to be on the roadside zoo-style attractions, especially in other countries, that let people post with sloths that are dressed up in human clothing and, just like take these photos where they're like holding them and have the sloths crawling on them and everything, and then post them on social media and all that stuff. The questionnaire asks about your attitudes towards sloths and this behavior, and then has a brief educational section about the problems with this type of activity, and then asks again for your thoughts on it all after reading that information. You can really help influence the next steps in sloth conservation by heading to Beardsley Zoo's Facebook page, finding the picture of the sloth, and then taking the quiz under it. I promise it won't take long at all. I did it today. Multiple AZA facilities are teaming up to better understand what their collection animals do at night, with the hope of using the information to further increase animal well-being across the AZA. Many facilities, including the Los Angeles Zoo and Lincoln Park Zoo, have started using monitoring technology 24/7 to try to not only understand what animals are doing when keepers aren't present, but even figure out ways to enrich their lives when the humans are gone. They've been experimenting with things like timed feeders and other enrichment from home ideas, while tracking the animals more with data loggers, trail cameras, and even home security systems. Many facilities involved in the project are already seeing noticeable improvements with just minor husbandry adjustments, such as providing diets in different ways overnight, giving daytime periods of quiet hours, and early morning habitat servicing, all of which lead to more species-appropriate behaviors as well as a reduction in undesirable behaviors from these animals. The studies have not only influenced the care of animals in some zoos, but have also alleviated some concerns that keepers had about certain animals. For instance, at Lincoln Park Zoo, there was a concern that some of the penguins weren't really into swimming at all, which is kind of an important penguin thing to do. But once monitoring was set up overnight and observed, the staff was surprised to discover that those penguins in question just happened to be night swimmers and were doing the desired behavior already, just not when the humans were around. What a cool study. I'm excited to see what else comes from it. And then last but not least, in the Zoo News segment this week, giant panda diplomacy is apparently back and better than ever. We've already talked about China's renewed commitment to giant pandas in United States zoos, with San Diego, San Francisco, and the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. gearing up for new bears to arrive. Well, this ish is going international again, y'all. I think that's how the kids say it. Anyway, the Premier of China recently visited Adelaide Zoo in Australia, where two announcements were made. The first one was that the giant pandas that currently call the zoo home will be making their way back to China, as expected. But the second announcement is that another pair of giant pandas will be coming to live at the zoo at a future date, probably this year. Now, the Adelaide Zoo is the only place in Australia that giant pandas have lived in recent history, and so far they're the only facility that has been announced to be receiving new bears as well. So I will be curious to see if any other places join that list or, what happens with it. But yep, panda diplomacy, after looking like it was going away, is back in full force, y'all.
Conservation! Conservation! News time! Oh yeah!
Okay, so this is one of those stories that really shouldn't be a story, but is a story. So here's the story. A recent study published in Scientific Reports shows unequivocally that the consumption of rhino horn has absolutely no positive effect on humans. There are no medicinal properties. You won't become a sexual dynamo. Just nothing. The study looked at the DNA in rhino horns and actually broke down exactly what is found in there. And while there are many elements in there, including many trace minerals people require for good health, the concentrations are so low that it is implausible that there are any mineral-related health benefits from ingesting rhino horn derivatives. At all. None. What these people are ingesting in larger quantities than they realize, however, is dirt. Soil gets so deeply embedded in rhino horns, and spoiler alert, there isn't exactly a lot of quality control in the products produced by the illegal rhino horn product market. So the likely effect is that people ingesting these products are getting dirt. So yeah, there's a whole poaching industry and illegal trafficking trade, and conservationists are dehorning rhinos in the wild just to keep them alive, all to stop people from snorting or eating dirt. Along with, of course, most of what the horn is, which is keratin, a material that makes up a lot of human fingernails. So basically, what people are doing when they choose to ingest rhino horn is roughly the equivalent of chewing the fingernails of a gross third grader who always lies about washing his hands before dinner. And that is why rhinos are in so much trouble in the wild. Cool. And then, of course, another aspect of the illegal wildlife trade is smuggling animals for pets. And one animal that really struggles with this is the cheetah. And one of the reasons this illegal trade has been so successful is that conservationists have had a hard time determining where the supply line begins. It's long been believed that the cheetah cubs in question mostly come from the Horn of Africa, but there isn't really more information than that. However, science and technology may now have the solution that will help us solve this problem. A couple different ways here. So, an organization called Climate Change Canada has tested a technique called stable isotope analysis that can hopefully be used to create a tool using hydrogen and oxygen isotopes to trace the cheetahs back to their point of origin, where law enforcement will be able to shut down trafficking rings. There's another project that is also running right now that's also trying to help the situation in the Horn of Africa using technology. This project looks at the fact that there are two problems facing conservationists in the area. It has been almost impossible to do a survey of the Horn of Africa to know where wild cheetahs still live because of a decades-long armed conflict, and the sheer remoteness of the area also makes it incredibly hard to survey. But now, an ecologist at Colorado State University is trying to use modern technology to get that survey done and also to better understand the attitudes of the people that live in that area in the hopes of engaging the local community and bringing them on board to help save cheetah cubs as well. So hopefully these two new projects involving modern technology and its usage will combine to help shut down one of the fastest growing and most lucrative arms of the illegal pet trade.
It's time for other news. It's time for other news. Hey, now, right now, it's time. It's time for other news. Hey, it's a segue to the park on other news.
All right, just one quick one here for you in other news. But video recently came out of a tiger shark throwing up some of its meal. Now, that's not entirely shocking, as the shark was being tracked as part of a 3-year tagging project by a marine biologist, and the marine biologist and some students were observing the shark at the time. But the surprising bit is that it threw up a whole echidna. Not just parts of one, an entire echidna. Scientists were confused, as the echidna is an animal that lives its life, on land. And tiger sharks are not that. But apparently, some echidnas do swim for short periods of time, though it is rare. This one seems to have decided to go for a swim at a particularly inopportune time and ended up in a tiger shark's mouth, but the shark decided it didn't like the whole spines thing and just spit the whole echidna back into the water. Now, sadly, the echidna did not survive this ordeal, but man, that must have been an experience for the marine biologist and students on the boat. Absolute craziness, and also kind of just the most Australian story ever.
Animal, animal, animal holidays. Animal, animal, animal holidays.
All right, it is June, which is Zoo and Aquarium Month, World Oceans Month, and Orca Month. For our individual days, we have June 21st, which marks the start of Cephalopod Week, is World Giraffe Day, and also Take Your Dog to Work Day. June 22nd is World Camel Day, unless you are Cedar Point Amusement Park, where apparently every day is Camel Day or Goat Day or something escaping day. Oh, it's also World Rainforest Day. That's less fun to make fun of Cedar Point about. Anyway, June 23rd is Pink Flamingo Day, which I guess means the little flaminglet we talked about earlier is left out of that one. But hey, whatever. The 24th starts Insect Week, which runs to the end of the month. And the 25th is National Catfish Day. And that's actually the last animal holiday for the whole month, as there isn't anything from the 26th through the 31st. And those are your animal holidays for the week. All right, and there you have it, folks. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News is done. Yay! And the crowd goes wild. You're the crowd. Are you going wild? I don't know. Anyway, I did want to take a moment since I knew my intro was going to go kind of long because unlike the lives of mayflies, the story about a mayfly can be rather long. As a matter of fact, that story was actually longer than the lives of some adult mayflies, but I digress. Anyway, I do want to remind y'all, though, to make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of these Zoo News episodes or any of my interview episodes. I also want to make sure that you are following along at Rossifari on all the socials except for TikTok, where we're at Rossifari Pod. And don't forget that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. I did just drop the second episode of the top secret special patron bonus content that I've been working on, and it's a pretty good one, I think. And so, if you're interested in hearing what that is and finding out more, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month and find out. Speaking of my patrons, I would love to say thank you to all of my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, and Jenny Owens. And also, I'd like to remind you all that you can contribute to Rossifari Zoo News by sending me stories. Email them, rossifaripod@gmail.com. Tag me in them on the aforementioned socials, or, scream them in my ear if we end up attending a Harrisburg Senators game together. Excuse me, Harrisburg Mayflies game. I'd like to thank everyone who did contribute this week, including Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Andrew King, Ann Yoshioka, Sam Evans, Dr. Laura Schenk, Jay Meredith, Lizard Dunlevy, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Matt Patford, Ali Malensky. Kay Malensky didn't send in anything this week, so you don't get to hear me sing The Malensky. Ah, crap, I just did it, didn't I? Anyway, thank you all for contributing stories this week. And remember, friends, the words, newsy credits backwards, are Steiderkius when. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. Well, a broken pupal chamber usually means death for an elephant beater. The premier of China recently visited